Retro.
What's up, guys? This is Daniel Logan, Boba Fett from Attack of the Clones, The Clone Wars, Book of Boba, Skywalker Saga game, and hopefully many more things in the Star Wars galaxy. You are listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Yep, this is the way I've spoken.
So we are pleased to be joined by a new guest of the show. Welcome, Jeff from World Gone Geek. Great to have you with us this evening.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here.
We usually get started on these Revenge of the Sith segments by asking our guests a few questions about their experience with the movie. Jay, you want to go ahead and kick that off?
Sure, I would love to. All right, Jeff. So we're going to quiz you a little bit here. What was your first experience seeing Revenge of the Sith? Like, how old were you? Do you have any special memories of it? So just fill us in on all the details.
Gosh, that was 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, oh yeah, 20. That's right. It was 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
So I was in 2005. I mean, I'm gonna show my age, I guess, if I have to tell you.
You're in good company. Trust.
I
Trust
know.
me.
Well, I mean, I saw the original in theaters, the first run, so I guess that really shows my age. But with Revenge of the Sith, yeah, I would have been just in my, I guess, early 30s, and I can't remember who all went with me. I'm sure some of my kids went with me, but I honestly can't remember exactly who went. Mostly just my boys were interested in Star Wars. The girls have never, well, one of them sort of likes it, but not like the boys. And so we don't all share the same nerdy things. They're all into nerdy stuff, but not all Star Wars. So with Revenge of the Sith, I want to say that my oldest went with me for sure, but I can't remember who all was there. I think it's getting harder for me to remember these things. I don't even remember who went to see Force Awakens with me, and that was more recent. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, I remember that similar type of situation because I had to find a babysitter for my firstborn at that point because he was one at the time. So yeah, and now he's in college. But yeah, I do remember those days. It was different. The first Star Wars movie I had to find a babysitter for in order to go see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've often shared the fact that I didn't even get to see Attack of the Clones in the theater. So Revenge of the Sith was one of the first date nights that my husband and I finally had, once the kids were old enough to stay with the babysitter. So we feel that, Jeff. We feel that.
Yeah. Well, Nathan my oldest would have been like 10 or 11, I think, at that time, around that age. And I'm sure that he would have wanted to go. He interesting. You remember when they re-released the original trilogy in theaters? He was about 5 years old when A New Hope came back. They re-released them, and I took him to see that. And I had gone when I was 5 years old to see the original in theaters in 1977 with my dad.
Aw, I
So that
love
was
that.
kind of a cool thing. But yeah, he's liked Star Wars ever since. So I'm sure that he went to see Revenge of the Sith with me. But they've all sort of run together, to be honest with you. Now it's hard. Now that I'm getting older, it's a lot harder to remember the specifics.
Sure. Do you have any plans to go to the re-release at all here in April?
I've thought about it. I've tried to be a little more frugal with my money going to theaters now. It definitely has to be a spectacle type film like this. But like we see all the Marvel movies, things like that. We'll go see Thunderbolts. But yeah, I've definitely been thinking about it because of the prequels. It is one of my favorite ones to watch. But it is I would go for the company more than just to see the movie again because obviously we can watch it on Disney Plus, or if you have it on digital or even on DVD now, you can just watch it at home. But if I went to see it in the theater again, it would be because I want to see it with people, fans who are excited about it again. And I don't know, are people still doing that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, are they going to see Star Wars like that again? Because that's the reason I would want to go.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know the last time I went for Return of the Jedi and also Phantom Menace. Well, Phantom Menace was a little bit more low key, I feel like, for my son and I when we went, but I had gone with some friends and we all cosplayed for the Return of the Jedi, actually. And that was a lot of fun. We had lightsabers out, the whole 9 yards.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, so I think you're absolutely on point when you say it really kind of depends on who you're with too. So yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
I might go check it out because of the crowd. That's the best part of it.
Absolutely.
And seeing it in the theater with people who are cheering along would definitely be worth it for sure.
All right. Well, the next question we have for you is, what is your favorite scene from Revenge of the Sith?
Oh my gosh. I knew you were going to ask me this, and so I was trying to prepare, and then I couldn't decide. I couldn't pick one. But I ended up I think for me, it's got to be kind of the final battle with Yoda, in where they're throwing the Senate, booths at each other and stuff like that. And I think it's because in Attack of the Clones, if I have to be perfectly honest, Attack of the Clones is actually my favorite prequel movie. I mean, I still like this one, but for some reason, I don't know, Attack of the Clones just stuck with me. I love that big battle at the end. But seeing Yoda, go haywire all over Count Dooku was just absolutely the coolest moment I think I've ever. That's one of my top 10 Star Wars moments, is him pulling that lightsaber, right? It was just like goosebumps. To know that this is probably, this one with Palpatine now is probably the last time we're going to see him fight again. Only the second time, and then therefore the last time. I think it was just memorable to me. I just really enjoyed that. Yeah.
That's a great one, for sure. For sure. So our last question then is, who is your favorite character in this movie?
Oh, now that one I listened to the other episode. Did you ask them that too? I wanted to make sure that I don't remember that one. My favorite character in this one. Oh my gosh, good question.
Game time decision. It's all good.
Yeah.
There's no wrong answers. No wrong answers.
I mean, my favorite character in the whole prequel trilogy is Obi-Wan. And so I think it's probably this one as well. I have my fair share of I love all the Star Wars movies, but I love them enough that I'm okay to criticize some of the things that I don't like about them too, and still love them. Like, it's okay. I know there's some things that aren't great, but Obi-Wan delivers like in all of them. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's never not on point. And in this one, I just Ewan McGregor is just so good in it, and I think probably he's my favorite. Plus, it's the hello there. Remember that?
Yeah.
That like this just becomes iconic. Like, there's something about him, and then just the heartbreak of when Anakin turns is just such a great performance from Ewan, I feel like. So probably he's my favorite.
Yeah, he's definitely awesome.
My favorite side character would be Chewbacca, just because I love him and everything, and the fact that he shows up in this one was next level. That was pretty great. Yeah, but he's not a main character.
That's all right. He's always, doing the co-pilot thing somewhere.
Yeah.
It's all good.
I mean, when he throws Yoda on his back and runs out, I mean, come on, that was just fantastic. Like, so nothing. I wanted so much more of that. Like, we needed to see more of that.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah, and he's fantastic.
They need a buddy movie, Chewbacca and Yoda. Like maybe Chewbacca went to visit him on Dagobah at some point, before Luke got there and all that. Yeah, some kind of adventure.
Be those what ifs,
Yeah, at some point we need a movie of Luke just talking about this crazy Jedi Master he talked on about he met on Dagobah, and Chewbacca's like, "Oh yeah, Yoda, I know him."
Yeah,
Wait,
Yep.
what? Okay,
for
all
sure.
right. Well,
That's
let's go ahead
fantastic.
and get into the segment then. We're going to be starting at 23 minutes and 37 seconds and run to about 34 minutes and 42 seconds. This segment starts off with a wide shot of Coruscant, and I loved how much of that they work into both Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, just giving us these shots, these setting shots of the planet, and just showing how huge and widespread the city that covers every inch of the surface is. But then we are at the Senate office buildings as Chancellor Palpatine, Anakin, and Obi-Wan arrive after the rescue. Obi-Wan's not sticking around. His excuse to Anakin is, "Oh, I'm not brave enough for politics." He has to report to the council. Beyond that, Anakin's trying to convince him to stay, saying, "Hey, this entire operation was your idea." And then Obi-Wan deflects, saying, "Hey, don't forget, you're the one that rescued me from the buzz droids, killed Count Dooku, rescued the Chancellor, all with me unconscious on your back." And then Anakin again reaches out and says, "Well, it's all because of your trainings." But Obi-Wan's not having it. And he says, "Today, you are the hero and you deserve your glorious day with the politicians," which we all know is going to be anything but. And then we have the disagreement over, how many times Anakin has saved Obi-Wan's skin, and, saying, not for the 10th time. And then Obi-Wan says that business on Cato and Imodia doesn't count. So one of the things I love about this little segment here is just the camaraderie that we get between these two. We got to see them in action together through the opening sequence of the movie and the rescue of Chancellor Palpatine, but now here's the aftermath, and they're both patting each other on the back. It's like, they're friends, they're buddies, they've been brothers this entire time, and we get to see just how affectionate they are towards each other. But Jeff, since we're talking to you for the first time about this movie, what do you think about the Obi-Wan Anakin pairing?
So it's funny that we, to talk about this now after the Clone Wars cartoon came out, because it really filled in so many blanks. But trying to remember like what it was like watching this for the first time, we have to fill in a lot of that backstory on our own. We don't know what happened between Attack of the Clones and now. Um, and I remember the first time I saw it, like, I'm like, man, what's been going on? You know what I mean? Like Anakin, he grew out his hair. He's like scarred, like he's a warrior. He literally just, decapitated someone a few minutes ago, and now they're just casually talking about what they're going to do, next. And it's like, who is this guy? And so I love this scene because it does kind of give us a chance to like, the whole everything leading up to that. There's a lot of banter that happens, between them. But this is the first time like they pause and we kind of really get like a chance where they're not just kind of throwing one-liners at each other, except for the "I saved your butt" type situation. But Obi-Wan's like, "Anakin, I'm very proud of you." Like there's this dad moment that was like, as a dad, I was just like, oh my gosh, and knowing Anakin doesn't have a father and how much that moment means to him just makes everything that's about to happen that much more tragic.
Mhm.
But there's like this foreshadowing of like, Obi-Wan praises him, he says he's you're wise, things like that. He's like really building up Anakin. And yet Anakin is also, like you said, it's all because of your training. He's trying to give credit where credit's due. And I don't know. I think that is a great moment considering what we know is coming. It should have been more heartwarming than it was. Do you know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
because we all know what's coming, it almost, even though it is heartwarming, it felt sad, kind of.
Mhm.
Yeah, good point.
To me. And I didn't read the novelization, but as I was like looking or reading about it now, I guess we hear in the novelization Obi-Wan was gonna tell him he loves him as a brother, but decides against it. And again, that the fact that he never says that to him before what happens is also heartbreaking. It's like, and I wonder if that was in the original script and they cut it or something, because then it would have been that much more heartbreaking. Like not being able to tell somebody that you love them,
Yeah.
before. before they die or before whatever, or before they turn evil and kill children.
Right, right. Well, to your point too, Jeff, I actually did go back and read the segment of Matthew Stover's novel before tonight because I always like to do a little bit of mirroring between, what we see in the movie versus what's in the novelization. And eventually, Dennis and I will break down the novelization sometime this year, I'm sure. But one of the things that Obi-Wan actually says is that Anakin truly is his other half.
Wow.
That there's so much of everything that happens, especially the part before the segment that we talked about last month with confronting General Grievous and the whole thing with, R2 getting that arc welder and getting free and then getting the lightsabers and, the whole 9 yards. It was, Obi-Wan often says that he can sense things about what even Anakin's thinking even before he realizes it. So, I think that that's such a great thing to point out there. And it truly is a spectacular, relationship between the two of them. And, also you pointed out the Clone Wars too, that we have that backstory now that just adds so much more richness to that. And I know for myself, I remember seeing this and thinking, wow, how much has this last decade really gone into a deepening of both of these characters, and their relationship has obviously shaped them in very significant ways, and that they're almost, two sides of the same coin at this point. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's fantastic. But yeah,
Yeah,
Well,
Dennis,
especially
did you
when
have
you
anything to add?
consider,
Yeah.
I would say, when you consider where these two started, Obi-Wan was writing Anakin off as another pathetic life form in the Phantom
yeah,
Menace, and
Right.
then, arguing with Qui-Gon about the boy's dangerous. They all see it. Why can't you? And only because Qui-Gon died did Obi-Wan ever agree to train Anakin. And now here is, showering praise on Anakin for everything that he just accomplished in this mission.
right.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I have always enjoyed the prequels, but I don't know that I ever loved them the way I loved the original ones. And the Clone Wars series really helped. I don't want to say redeem because they didn't need redeeming, but th- they filled in so much backstory that when I went back and watched the prequels again with that wealth of like additional, backstory and relationship filled out, it was so much more meaningful somehow. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
like this moment like meant so much more because I wasn't having to imagine what it was. Like they developed those characters, that didn't have time to do in 3 movies,
Hmm. Hmm.
And so I've really enjoyed the Clone Wars series for that reason alone, that it just made me appreciate the prequels so much more than I did before.
Absolutely. And I know Dennis and I, with revisiting and rewatching the whole series, I'm seeing so much of that even just watching this particular segment. It's almost so seamless when you think about how that animated series truly does layer these characters in such a unique way, in such a profound way.
Well, here's a
Indeed.
question that I have then. You that like reference of Cato Nemoidia,
Hmm.
like, do we ever find out what that was? Was that
Hmm.
in the Clone Wars anywhere? Because I never thought to like even make that connection until I watched it again in preparation for this, and I'm like, hey, I wonder if Filoni actually took that reference and made an episode. Do you know if that's the case?
Not in the Clone Wars, but it was explored in the novel Brotherhood.
By
Okay,
Mike Chen, yes, that was
Yes, by
interesting.
Mike
just
All
Chen.
right.
Thank you. I couldn't think of who
yeah.
who wrote it off the top of my head. But yeah, there's a whole mission to Cato Nemoidia that explains
Oh,
what this actually is, which is
that's funny.
amazing because I remember when they were teasing this book coming out, I kept telling Dennis, "Oh, we're finally going to find out what that business on Cato
Businesses,
Nemoidia
yeah,
was."
It was just
yeah.
a throwaway line, you know what I mean? Just to show that they've had a history together, kinda. But I was like, when I heard it this time, I'm like, "Oh, now we've had a chance to find out what that was, did we?" That's
Mhm.
great. I may have to check that book out.
It's
Yeah, your
amazing.
instincts
Yeah,
are
highly
right because any line like that is always going to get developed into something else by
recommend.
somebody eventually. So,
So
all
true.
right, well, let's go ahead and say goodbye to Obi-Wan for this segment. This is the last time we see him for the next 10 minutes. But the action turns to Mace Windu and Chancellor Palpatine as Palpatine debarks the shuttle. He's greeted by a group of senators and Mace Windu, who asks if he's all right. Palpatine credits the 2 Jedi Knights, and then he makes a point of not wasting any time to say, well, Grievous escaped, so that means that the war is going to continue. I'm sure the Senate's going to vote for that. And then Mace Windu's response is, well, Grievous is going to run away and hide like he always does. He's a coward. And the Jedi Council will make finding Grievous their highest priority. This is a scene that has a lot of tension simmering below the surface. These are men that don't particularly like each other, as far as best I can tell here. It's been noted in the Attack of the Clones and then here and other places that Palpatine's been in power much longer than he should have been, but because of the Emergency Powers Act, he's been able to stick around, and the war has just dragged out. It needs to end here, and so Mace Windu is eager to get this over with. Jay, we'll start with you this time. What do you think about this discussion?
Well, yeah, I mean, Mace is definitely, I mean, we know him to be able to see all of the shatter points. And so I think for him, he's frustrated because he can't really see very well what's going on with Palpatine and with all of the things that have happened, because of course there's this shroud of the dark side going on. But Mace knows that there's something under the surface that, and I think it's very frustrating to him. And just that line, even with Grievous will run and hide as he always does, he is a coward, that just right there puts the stamp on exactly how he feels about the entire operation of the Separatists in general, and everything else that's going on. So I think some of that comes from, like you said, he doesn't like this all going on, and I think that he's a little frustrated in the fact that he's maybe not super confident in being able to see those shatter points like he normally does.
Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's obvious that I think it's obvious here in this scene that Mace doesn't trust Palpatine. Like he senses something isn't right. Which again, I wish we knew more. I wish we could see more of kind of like what's really going on in Mace's head at this point. But I love Palpatine's, like, the way he talks to him here. Well, and this whole opening, like all the way through, how he's manipulated everything that's happening is just mind blowing to me. And it's not just for political gain. I mean, it is for political gain, right? So that he can become emperor. But at the same time, everything that he's done to gain power for himself has also been used like perfectly to twist Anakin in the way that he needs him to twist as well. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
And just seeing him puppet master and then acting all innocent. Thank goodness, these Jedi were there when I needed them, and he hates them. You know what I mean? Like it's so insincere. We know it is, you know what I mean? And I feel it's just like watching politicians on the news that you know what I mean? Like in real life. Like I'm just like, this is so the politics in the prequels are interesting to me, because it's like it's clearly like this is a guy who's in the background doing stuff we know is just terrible. And yet here he is in public, acting like everything is fine, and then he, and praising people that he secretly hates, and all that kind of stuff. So for me, this was another chance to see Palpatine, at his best. And it's a great performance from him as well. If when we're trying to decide between you and McGregor and Ian McDiarmid, I don't know who wins. But yeah, I mean, I think I still got to lean towards Obi-Wan, but he's so good in this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're right. It is very much a politician speak, because it is I'm fine. Thank you very much for asking. Your Jedi Knights, credit to you, did a great job rescuing me. But don't think just because Count Dooku is dead that this war is going to end, which is what you want. And then Obi-Wan's like, well, fine. Then we will make what you just said is the as the goalpost. We'll reach for that and get that taken care of. And so it was very much a deliberate. Both of them were very deliberate in everything they said there. Meanwhile, the mirror of that's kind of happening behind them. Anakin is talking to Senator Organa, who is very fond of the Jedi, and Anakin is kind of almost lamenting that the war is not over. He makes the comments, the fighting's going to continue until Grievous is spare parts. And, it's a very quick scene. And then he excuses himself from talking to Bail Organa because he sees Padme there. But at this point, Anakin he's eager to get this war over with. And we'll see why in just a second. Jay, did you have any thoughts on that brief exchange between Anakin and Bail?
The only thing that, I wanted to point out in that is just the fact that I think that just this one line does in the prequels what I know in the original trilogy, when they blew up the Death Star, and it was like, oh yeah, the war is over. Da, da, da. Like, no, it's not. There's still things. Just because you took out Dooku doesn't mean that, oh, well, everybody's just gonna, my give up, kind of a thing. And so Anakin realizes that, and he realizes that Grievous is going to keep going, even in the absence of Dooku, because he still has a stake in this. So I appreciated that a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And of course, the reason why he has to excuse himself from talking to Senator Organa is because he notices Padme waiting over there, kind of on the side and out of sight. They immediately embrace. Padme had heard rumors that Anakin had been killed in the war, and Anakin is almost thankful that this invasion of Coruscant, the kidnapping of Palpatine, happened, because it got him back to Coruscant from the Outer Rim sieges that he and Obi-Wan were stuck in. And then Padme cautions Anakin about being affectionate in public and then he's like, I don't care if everyone knows we're husband and wife. And then she says, hey, don't talk like that. And then he notices she's trembling, and she gives him the news that she is pregnant and expecting there. So again, it's our introduction of Padme in this movie. Jeff, what did you think about her role in the movie overall and her introduction into the film here?
So I was left with a lot of questions when it comes to Padme in this, and I wrote down a lot of questions, after watching it again, the things that stuck out to me. I liked this moment. I thought it was pretty cool. I love Anakin's excited yet pained reaction. There's probably so many emotions going through him when she says she's pregnant. One of them is, oh my gosh, what am I going to tell the Jedi? Another one is, oh my gosh, that's one more person that I got to worry about, because he's already trying to figure out what to do. More people in my life that I have to care about and protect, from everything, because ever since his mom, things like that. And then struggling just with the whole concept of this war that's going on and what that means for him to now have to be a father. But then it all culminates in ultimately and I think as a dad, I mean, I think I've gone through similar situations when I found out my wife was pregnant. It's like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And am I going to be a good dad? And, lots of emotions, but it always ends in joy, right? Because it's like, well, at the end of the day, we'll figure this out. I'm going to be a dad, and this is going to be great. I don't know where we're going to find money or tell the Jedi or whatever, but you know what? Forget about it. This is good. This is good news. This is a blessing, he says. And he ends up there. And this is yet another moment in these movies where I feel like I think the biggest problem, or the biggest tragedy in Anakin's life, is that everyone betrays him, and or doesn't, sometimes what he wants to do and what he thinks, even though he's a rash decision, sometimes he's right. And in this situation, he was right. When he says, I don't care, I want to tell everybody, I'm tired of the deceit. Do you know what I mean? I see that as a turning point. If Padme had just said, you know what, fine, let's do it, we might not have ever had a Darth Vader. You know what I mean? I feel like probably the Jedi would have kicked him out, but I don't know that he would have worried about he would have been like, let's just run off to Naboo and be a family. You know what I mean? He might have pulled an Ahsoka for all we know. Do you know what I mean? And been like,
Yeah.
forget the Jedi. Do you know what I mean? I've given all this time to you guys, and you can't let me love the person I love. Then see ya. You know what I mean? Like that could be, who knows? I don't know. But it's yet another situation where something happens that pushes him a little bit further. You know what I mean? Into keeping secrets, and then the Jedi ask him to keep secrets. Then all these things push him in that direction, and it's, for me, it's heartbreaking that it's Padme at this point. You know what I mean? Like she's also sort of betraying him in this way, and just not, like, if you would just let him tell everybody, then you could both be happy. But you asked about her just in general. She also later says something. I wrote it down. Hold on. She says, "I doubt the Queen will let me continue to serve in the Senate." Why?
Mhm.
Are you not allowed to have kids
Good point.
in the
I
Senate?
wondered that too. Thank you for bringing that up.
And I'm like, okay, so the Queen is a jerk if that's the case. But like, and stuff like that. But there's just little things like that. But there's all these things again where she is putting these obstacles in Anakin's way of just coming clean. Do you know what I mean? And I felt like if he could just come clean, like it would have saved everyone. Luke and Leia would have had a dad. Like the you know what I mean? Of course, then there wouldn't have been balance to the Force, and the Death Star probably would have blown up more than just Alderaan, because there wouldn't have been a Luke, all that who grew up to become a Jedi. I get it, but at the same time, it's tragic. It's sad. I don't like
Mhm.
that she's in his way here a little bit, because I know she loves him, but it's like, Padme, why would you push for this? Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like you could be his voice of reason here, and she's not, and that's just kind of sad too. And I don't know
Yeah.
if she's being manipulated somehow through the Force as well. Who knows? But I don't, I don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm
I
It's
sad
a
hear
about it.
tough
you.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. And I have to say, Jeff, I really appreciate the fact that you pointed out the realism and the empathy of what it's like to find out, as a dad, that you're going to become a dad, because I feel like this particular scene often gets criticized, that Anakin is kind of fumbling over his words and he doesn't seem happy at first, like he's just sort of maybe masking it by saying that he's happy to Padme, kind of a thing. But I mean, the dude just came back from war too. I mean, you have
Oh,
to
for
also
sure.
remember he's a soldier, and I mean, you got to remember too, I mean, I try to put this in the real life perspective of a soldier actually coming back from the battlefield and then coming back into society, and they've just come off of this loss and this pain and these suffering and all of these things, that even though there's still lightheartedness and banter, as we saw, I mean, the reality of it is that, I mean, throughout the Clone Wars, he saw a lot of stuff, and he's been
Hmm.
gone for 5 months. And so, to find this out, just it would throw you for a tizzy. But, as you said, he embraced it, and he was, ready to move on, and be there for both Padme and for his child.
Yeah, I felt that was the most realistic thing in a sci-fi movie with magic wizards and lightsabers. But if you think about it, because I mean, when I found out my wife was pregnant for the first time, and we knew we were going to have a family. It wasn't like it was a surprise, but it was like, when it happened, it was the happiest day of my life. It was also the most scared I've ever been in
Oh,
my life.
sure. Yeah.
Like, it's like I had so many different emotions at the same time. So I thought Hayden Christensen did a pretty good job of kind of like struggling with, of course we know again who he's going to become and what he's already struggling with. But even if he was just a regular dude, like, there's a lot of emotions that are going through your head at that point.
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. And I have to point out that my first impression of Padme when I first saw her was, oh, she has Leia buns. They brought back the Leia buns, because we hadn't seen that particular exact hairstyle throughout the prequel trilogy. So I was like, yeah, there we go.
yeah.
There it is.
And
Yeah,
I
it's
have
very
more
much
to
an
say
go
about
ahead.
Padme, but I don't know if it's not right for this episode because it's more towards the end. But I don't know if you want to talk about that or not. But
Well, we'll see if we have a little bit of time left at the end of the
sure,
discussion
sure.
here, because we still have a lot to cover
Yeah,
going on.
sure.
I was just going to make a point that you bring up an interesting inflection point, because yeah, if they got caught up in Attack of the Clones with their roles. And again, always wanted to be a Jedi, and he was a Jedi. Padme was a senator, and if they got married and that became public, that was going to interfere with their duties to do both. And here they are at this crisis point in what's going on in the galaxy. And to me, I just can't help but wonder if it's they just Padme became incapable of putting that part of her life aside. And this was something that was unexpected, unplanned. And now in the face of it, it's, we talked about this when we got married, we were going to keep it a secret so that we could be a Jedi and a senator. And now this is going to make it very hard to keep that secret. So yeah, it would have been interesting if they had left. And, that example you brought up, if, Anakin wasn't around, does Order 66 go down the way it does? Even if it does that mean Anakin is safe off in Naboo and then he can be part of a resistance against Chancellor Palpatine and the Empire? Maybe he's the guy that leads the fleet that blows up the Death Star or something. Countless number of what if scenarios that could have happened if this little scene had gone differently.
Yeah, and there's a lot of moments like that, which is what I find interesting. It's just these little things that are said to him, and we'll talk about another one here in a little bit.
Sure. Okay, well then the next scene that we've got here is Grievous returns to Utapau aboard his shuttle. He lands, he has no time for pleasantries, just marches right past the Separatist leaders and the battle droids, heads into a communication room and contacts Darth Sidious. And this is kind of them recouping after the plan to abduct the Chancellor failed, as far as Grievous knows. He says, what are we going to do now? I'm paraphrasing, of course, that Count Dooku is dead, and Darth Sidious's response is, Dooku is a necessary loss, but will soon have a younger and more powerful apprentice, and then he advises Grievous to take the Separatist leaders to Mustafar. So we've got our introduction of Darth Sidious based on the fact that, if you don't already know that Palpatine and Sidious are the same person, but this is the guy, this is the Phantom Menace behind everything that's going on in the war. Jay, what did you think about this little discussion that Sidious and Grievous have?
Well, it hit me that at the time anyways, that Grievous really didn't know that they were the same person, Palpatine and Sidious, because, he acts as though, they truly are, put behind by this new development, quote unquote. And so, of course, Sidious has to reassure him that there's more plans and we're going to regroup and we're going to go to Mustafar, the whole 9 yards. And, you almost, in some ways, I kind of feel bad for Grievous because he really was played. I mean, with his whole backstory and everything. And yeah, I know he made his bed and now he has to lie in it and he's not a nice guy. But I mean, he really did get played one against the other. But I loved the introduction here just because the fact that, we get that him coughing again and then he's like, almost dying, and then right before he hits the hologram, he like pulls it all together and he's like, Lord Sidious, and like he's completely fine, like he tries to put that at bay, and he's almost like a completely different being at that point. But yeah, it definitely sets up a lot here.
Yeah, well, and to your point, everyone in Darth Sidious' orbit gets played.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Count Dooku, Darth Maul, Anakin, everybody does. And the Separatist leaders, they all got played. They were all just pawns, means to an end here. Jeff, did you have any thoughts on this scene?
Not necessarily. I mean, other than, I was glad that later we do finally get to see Grievous in action, in similar to the ways we saw in the original little animated series that came out, the little shorts. I had been looking forward to his character so much, and then never really got a huge payoff until this movie. So I was glad to see that. But yeah, it was interesting. But I did wonder, did he not know who Sidious was? And I guess not.
All right. Well, the next scene gets us back to Padmé's apartment. It's at night. We get another great shot of Coruscant, again, this time at night. So we get to see all the lights on. That's pretty cool. She's out on the veranda brushing her hair, and then Anakin is watching and smiling. She's kind of in her evening attire, and she's talking about how she wants to go have the baby on Naboo in the Lake Country. Nobody would know. And then she's excited because she knows just the right place to set up the baby's room near the garden. Anakin remarks that she's so beautiful. And then there's this kind of awkward exchange. It's, she's like, it's only because I'm so in love. And then he's trying to be sweet, says, no, it's because I'm so in love with you. And then her response is, so love has blinded you? And he's just like, kind of throws his hand up at that point. Well, that's not exactly what I meant. And then she kind of lets him off the hook that says, but it's probably true. So we have this moment of affection back and forth between the two of them here. Jeff, what's your take on the relationship here? We just had the moment where you're talking about how she doesn't kind of relent on them going public with the relationship, but here they are kind of basking in the glow of their new situation, as expectant parents.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we needed something like that, but I personally didn't get much out of the scene. I was more like it did feel pretty awkward. So love is, it's blinded you, and I'm just like, well, what is that supposed to mean? Like, what are you trying?
Right.
But then, and I still don't get what she means by it's probably true. Like I don't know. It's another one of, again, I love George Lucas with all my heart and soul. But sometimes I wonder, like some of the things that dialogue that he's written, and I'm just like, what are they talking about? It may have sounded good in your head, but it doesn't always sound good when it comes out of actors. And I probably wouldn't have had this scene in there at all. Like I feel like we got enough. You know what I mean? Because we then go to the dream, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, here in a few minutes. But I don't know. I don't know that we necessarily needed this to get there, but that's just me.
Mhm.
Mhm.
For me, I think what it does is it sets up the fact that they have embraced this future and that they are now looking forward to it, and the banter back and forth. Yeah, it's cheesy. I mean,
That's
no
fair.
lie there. But, the thing of it is that it goes all the way back to even, when Anakin said, "Are you an angel?" Kind of a thing. But I think what it does is it helps set up the next scene so much more, just because now we know how high the stakes are. You know what I mean? Not that they weren't before when he first found out, but it just seems like there's so much more joy
Yeah,
involved with this impending birth, and there's so much joy in their relationship and with each other, that the thought of what happens in the dream just gives it just that much more gravity.
that's fair. Yeah.
Mhm. And speaking of the dream, Anakin has his nightmare, and Padme is in the middle of childbirth. We hear a baby crying. Anakin wakes up in a sweat. He gets out of bed and he heads to the veranda. Padme notices him leave, and so she comes out after him. She's asking him what's wrong. He deflects by saying nothing. It was just a dream. And then he notices the Japor snippet and says, "Hey, I remember when I gave this to you." And then, she kind of pushes him. Like says, "When is we gonna start being honest with each other?" And so finally he relents and he talks about how in this dream it's similar to like what he had when before his mother died. She dies in childbirth but doesn't know what happened to the baby, and he assures her that he's not going to let this one become real. And Padme asks, maybe Obi-Wan can help us. What do you think? Can he help us? And Anakin's response is, we don't need his help. And then he goes on to say that the baby is a blessing. So, in just a moment ago, we had Anakin saying, making a very logical suggestion that I don't care, if everyone knows, and that could have resolved everything. But now it's Padme's turn saying, maybe we should go to Obi-Wan for help. And perhaps that could have changed everything. What do you think about that, Jeff?
Yeah, I did think that was kind of interesting. It's like we don't need anybody's help or whatever. But again, I feel like it's just like let's run away. Like let's
Mhm.
like, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I think ultimately, it's written to set up what Palpatine's going to tell him later. You know what I mean? I think more than anything, it's like Anakin's response there has to do with the fact that he doesn't actually believe Obi-Wan can do anything that can help him. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like if he's like, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And so that's just his acceptance and not acceptance in a good way, but just like, just further solidifying his dread, I guess. Do you know what I mean? Is that
Mhm.
Obi-Wan can't fix this. So what's the point of telling him? That's where I felt like his motivation might be. But again, yeah, if they hadn't gone to Obi-Wan and done what he had said to begin with, it would have been great. But yeah, I think it's more, if this is going to happen, there's nothing anyone else can do about it. I have to fix this somehow. I think that, and again, that just may come down to his instincts of, a new father or whatever. Says I can fix everything. Because we think we can until something terrible comes along, and then we realize that we don't have as much power as we'd hoped to protect our children. But I think it also does confirm one of the best parts of this conversation, though. Or did you mention? Are we mentioning the dialogue between them where he tells her what happened?
What do you mean?
Where he tells her you die in childbirth.
Oh, yeah. We are
Okay.
going to get to that. Yep.
He says you die in childbirth, and her first response immediately is, "And the baby?" Like, her immediate concern is the baby okay? And that's a mom.
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, immediately. Which sets up my big disappointment about how they did Padme wrong in this movie and made me so angry. But I love that scene, like, between them, like, he's worried about her, she's worried about the baby. And then I think that, again, that just solidifies his dread. It's like, okay, oh, you're right. It's both of you. Now I have to save two of you. And you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and it's like, Obi-Wan can't help us. I got to figure this out.
Right. Yeah. And to your point earlier, too, you brought up the fact that he kind of, remembers back to when he couldn't save his own mom. So,
Mhm.
that's always looming in the back of his mind as well. If he'd have just gotten there, an hour earlier, a day earlier, or whatever, and he would have followed his initial instincts, then he may not have let her die. So there's that part of it too. But, as far as like going to Obi-Wan is concerned, I mean, for as much as Anakin and Obi-Wan are, like we were saying, two halves of the same whole or two sides of the same coin, we know that Anakin still has a little bit, I wouldn't call it resentment for Obi-Wan, but, he said even in Attack of the Clones, he's holding me back, kind of thing. And he knows that Obi-Wan has the sense of duty to the Jedi code, and that maybe he doesn't think that he fully understands Anakin's emotions or his turmoil or their state of being. And that,
Mhm.
what's Anakin going to do? He has no other choice but to, recommend that I get kicked out of the order. So I don't know exactly what Padme was thinking in that situation, other than just the fact that they were close. But ultimately, I mean, I feel like she should have known that he would have erred on the side of the Jedi Council more than
Mhm.
anything.
So yeah, when it comes to this line and that suggestion that they go to Obi-Wan, we've just been talking about how close Obi-Wan and Anakin are. And now we get the benefit of the Clone Wars to see how many adventures they went through and how often Padme was part of those adventures and how close all three of them that were. They were the big three of the prequel trilogy, the same way that Han, Luke, and Leia were of the original trilogy here. They're a close-knit bunch. I can see why an appeal to a friend would be attractive to her. I can also understand, potential point of view from Anakin that, we just had him talking about how important Obi-Wan's training was. And is this going to be something that disappoints Obi-Wan?
Mhm.
So, it's like, we don't need his help. Is that just another way of saying, I don't want to tell Obi-Wan? I don't want, because that's essentially me going against my Jedi vows, the Jedi way, having an attachment, getting married, having children. That's not what Jedi do in all of this. And, I don't want to disappoint my quote unquote dad out of all of this. So I can see there's that. And then later in the movie, we see there is a bit of jealousy going on. Anakin is jealous of anyone that gives Padme some sort of attention and any type of reciprocal attention that she might give them, no matter how benign it is there. So I think there's a lot of reasons he reacted to that the way he did there. One question I wanted to bring up here, this is the second time Anakin's had these type of dreams. The first time was about his mom before she was killed. in captivity with the Tuscans, and now there's this going on. Do we think Sidious had anything to do with planting these dreams or manipulating? Because he certainly knows about them later.
Mm-hmm.
And, because he comes out right and says it, I can help you save the one you love, which is Padme. Now, it wouldn't take a genius to necessarily put two and two together that there was a thing going on between Anakin and Padme, but there is another level to knowing that he's got this big concern that is motivating him to keep her from dying. I mean, he comes down to even the whole Darth Plagueis, the tragedy of Darth Plagueis that he talks about.
That's a good point. And I think you're right in a lot of ways, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, then let's get on to our final scene here. And this is the Jedi Temple. Coming off of this discussion between Anakin and Padme, he goes to get guidance from Yoda. And apparently he's only vaguely describing what's going on, because Yoda's talking about some premonitions, some visions, and then asks, what is he seeing? And Anakin says, pain, suffering, and death. It's not about himself, but someone he knows. Yoda asks if it's someone close to you. Anakin's response to this is yes. And then Yoda advises that he must be careful when sensing the future, because the fear of loss is a path to the dark side. And Anakin says he's not going to let these visions come true, but he asks what he must do. Yoda's advised that death is a natural part of life. Rejoice for those around you who transform into the Force. Mourn them, do not. Miss them, do not. Attachment leads to jealousy, the shadow of greed, that is. And then Yoda advises that Anakin train himself to let go of everything that he is afraid to lose. This is not comforting advice at all, I think, for the average person. It's something that Jedi have to learn how to do. But Jeff, what do you make of all this? Is this any way helpful to Anakin?
Not even a little bit. I hate. So this might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually really, despite some issues that I have with the film, I loved The Last Jedi of the sequel trilogies.
Mm-hmm.
And because I think it got the Jedi absolutely right. They're at a point in this movie now, looking back, especially when I watch it now, where they are almost as political as the Senate is. Do you know what I mean? Like, they are. When I watch the interactions in the Senate and how they keep, dogging Anakin, and then after we get the Clone Wars and see all the things that Anakin has accomplished, and he is still being treated this way in the Jedi Council. And I'm like, that council is messed up. Like, there's something wrong with them. And I even think Yoda is wrong here. And I love Yoda, but I think he gives terrible advice here. The idea that one shouldn't mourn or miss someone who's died, he says you should rejoice that they've joined with the Force. And we say that to people now. We're like, be glad they aren't suffering. We rather celebrate their life than have a funeral. You know what I mean? This funeral is about celebrating their life, not mourning their death, right? Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that you don't miss them. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's impossible. It's impossible to not miss someone who has died. You can be happy that they're not suffering. You can be, depending on your religion, you can be happy on whatever they've gone on to in the next life, or whatever you might believe, but you still miss them. And Yoda says you shouldn't mourn or miss someone. And I'm like, that's not a natural response, at least not for a human. I don't know if that's common in other alien cultures, but you can't ask a human being to do that. And that's what he's asked him. He's asking him to do something that's not just against, what he wants to do, like, don't do bad things, right? He's asking him to go against his nature. And it's not a nature that is an evil thing to miss someone or to have sorrow, or those are emotions people should be allowed to have. And the fact that he's denying Anakin that here really bothers me now that I look back on it. And then he says, let go of everything you fear to lose. That's also terrible advice. In fact, it's also a good way to be sure that you lose it, right? If you let it go, it's gone. Like you know, that's how you lose things, is you let it, whether it's a friendship or love or even a loyalty to the Jedi Order. You know, if you hold on to it, or if you don't hold on to it, you'll lose it. So the whole attachment thing has always been an issue with me in these movies. I've never liked that about the Jedi. I feel like that's the one thing, you know, that I understand, you know, some of the ideas as far as like, you know, maybe not wanting them to be married or whatever so that they can devote their lives to the Jedi Order. But, you know, this whole idea that attachment leads to jealousy, well, that's also nonsense. You can be jealous for a lot of reasons that, you know, a lot of times jealousy comes from wanting something you don't have, not something you're attached to. I'm jealous of your skills in the Force, Yoda. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't have that. I don't know, stuff like that. Like I feel like this is a big fail for Yoda at this time, and I think he knows that later. And I feel there's two scenes that I think really feed where we see Yoda in Empire, and one of them is in Attack of the Clones when he chooses to save Obi-Wan and Anakin rather than stop Dooku at the end. Remember that? He drops the stuff on him and he holds it up. He saves them. He puts it aside and he kind of looks forlorn because he's like, I could have let them. I think he could have let them die, and they could have ended the war that day. Do you know what I mean? If he had finished off Dooku.
Yep.
And that's why I think that might be part of why he tells Luke not to go after his friends. Do you know what I mean? He's like, I did that, and look what happened. Like, we wouldn't be having this conversation if I had just finished the job. Yeah, I would have sacrificed some friends. But then I think that still bothers him. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I think this might be another moment that maybe looking back, he probably regrets. Like if he had handled Anakin differently, maybe we wouldn't have had a Darth Vader. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is another one of those turning points. And I think in that little swamp, Yoda, for the last 20 years or whatever it is before Luke gets there, he's been contemplating those two moments in his life as like,
Right.
what could I have done differently? And that's why he's so isolated. That's why he doesn't, take the opportunity to go, and get out of there, because he those are the two biggest regrets probably of his life. Not that he regrets saving them. I don't mean that, but just that it's like, gosh, did I do the right thing? I don't know. Yeah.
Sure.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you make some
But yeah,
phenomenal points there.
Back to the original question. Sorry. It was terrible advice. Like, of course, Anakin's going to blow it with that advice. You know what I mean? Like, again, I just feel like he's unknowingly feeding that manipulation that Palpatine is gonna use to turn him.
Yeah, and I think what too is probably worth pointing out is just the fact that because Yoda is, almost 800 years old at this point, he speaks beyond a level that Anakin can understand. So when he's speaking about these things, I think that he forgets that Anakin's not going to necessarily inherently understand all of it. Even though Yoda works with younglings, and we saw him being so wonderfully able to relate to the younglings, even in Attack of the Clones. But I think there's definitely a disconnect with Anakin. And, it's like one of the things I know in the novelization that Anakin says back to Yoda, and I wish they would have left this in the movie, is, when Yoda says, "Rejoice for those who transform into the Force, mourn them, do not, miss them, do not." And then Anakin retorts with, "Then why do we fight at all, Master? Why save anybody?" And then Yoda says, "Speaking of anybody, we are not," Yoda said. "Speaking of you and your vision and your fear, we are." So, he kind of just throws it right back on Anakin again. So basically, Anakin just sort of, throws up his hands and says, "All right, well, we got a bunch of Yoda, babble here that he obviously doesn't even want to try to understand me. So, you can understand why Anakin's frustrated."
For sure.
I would
All right.
be.
So I'm going to stand up for Yoda just a little bit here. And don't necessarily disagree with everything you say. But who does Yoda even think Anakin's talking about in this instance? I think Yoda thinks Anakin's talking about Obi-Wan in this case, not someone that he's married to. Yoda has no clue that Anakin and Padmé are married, and that this is a marriage, that this is someone Anakin's fallen head over heels in love with, that this is someone he's expecting a child with. And if he had known that, this would have gone very different. But Anakin's cryptic about what he's talking about because he knows Yoda's not going to approve of all of that.
Right. Good point.
Two things, the Jedi have their rules. We do not take anyone above the age of an infant in this because they already come in with these attachments, and we've seen in the past that these attachments lead to the dark side. Have they taken it too far? Yes. Could they maybe have figured out a way to advise people through that over the course of their lives rather than just saying, cutting it off at the source? Probably as well. But Yoda didn't agree with the council's decision to let Anakin join the Jedi and become Obi-Wan's apprentice at the end of the Phantom Menace. He was against that. And if he'd stuck to his guns, they probably aren't in the position that they're in here. Second, with it being a Jedi, someone, they're all trained to this. This is the order. This is how they go about celebrating life on a day-to-day basis. And it is like, if your brother, who has devoted himself to the Force, dies in that service, then he becomes one with the Force, and that's what he's been communing. That's what he's been doing, preparing his entire life for. I can see why that might have been advice, but he has no idea what Anakin's talking about. And if Anakin had just come out and told him this, as opposed to saying there's somebody else that they're going to experience pain, suffering, and death, and this, that, and the other, well, not that you should. I agree. Everyone should be able to mourn, and we see the Jedi mourn over this. And you don't tell me that Obi-Wan didn't mourn for Satine in the Clone Wars and the like here. But this notion, but I think I think it's when he thinks he's talking about a Jedi, it's probably different in Yoda's mind. Maybe not justifiably so, but and I don't think this explanation I'm giving completely excuses him here. But I think it just speaks to the depth of that. Yoda had no idea what Anakin was talking about in this situation.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, and I think that actually probably lends some credence to what I'm saying about him on Dagobah still being one of the biggest regrets. Now that he probably knows, you know what I mean? Like now he probably knows. Oh my gosh, that's what he was talking about. You know what I mean? Like it probably still is one of his biggest regrets because he didn't know. Maybe that he handled that wrong because he didn't know the truth. But yeah, it's all, I mean, that's the whole thing. Like there's so many lies and deception that's going on. And I feel like that's where I feel like, though, like you said, these rules have been around for a long time. I feel like the Jedi's, their rules are kind of partially their downfall in a ways. Like they're almost, their religion has become almost bureaucratic. I mean, you hear the way they're voting on stuff. It doesn't, I don't know. It comes across to me as that they have, kind of gotten too big for their britches at this point. And they did kind of, maybe there was a reboot that was needed. Not what happened. That's not what I'm saying.
Sure.
But,
no, I mean? That's understandable. Yeah.
But that it's like, what they needed was, a Martin Luther to come and nail some resolutions on the door of the Jedi Council that said, look, you know what I mean? We're not doing this right, and that, maybe some reform would have helped the order and maybe even saved Anakin's life too. But, yeah,
well, to your point, Jeff, if I can interrupt for a second.
No, please.
Darth Sidious took advantage of the rules.
For sure.
And, and the rules held up for generations, for thousands of years. But Darth Sidious is the ultimate Sith in all of this. He saw the weaknesses and then he exploited those to get Anakin, the chosen one, to turn to the dark side here. He made sure that the object of his desire was in front of him, that there was opportunities for him to be around her, that he could, they already accepted Anakin into the order when they shouldn't have. And once they broke that rule, he was able to manipulate everything to make Anakin frustrated with them and to establish that fear, to establish that anger, that hate that led to him falling to the dark side.
Yeah.
Right.
And he never made Anakin do anything. He got him to a point where he chose it, which is
Yep.
the most tragic part of all.
Oh, yeah. So true.
All right. Well, this has been one heck of a conversation. We got a lot more out of these 11 minutes than I thought we were going to here. This has been fantastic. But that does bring us to the end of the segment. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. This has been fantastic. Before we let you go, do you want to remind everybody where they can find everything that you're up to and what your social media contacts are?
For sure. Yeah. So we have a fan community called World Gone Geek. We're just trying to bring some positivity back to fandoms and celebrate the things we love about our fandoms instead of fighting over the things we don't. And we have a podcast called The Podcast is Real, but you can find us pretty much anywhere by searching World Gone Geek on any podcast network. And on socials, we're at World Gone Geek, pretty much everywhere except Twitter or X or whatever it's called these days.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely, Jeff. Thank you so much. And may the force be with you.
And you as well.
And there you have it. That was part 3 of Revenge of the Sith, and lot to discuss there. That was
Yeah.
quite the conversation. It was one of those. This always happens, and I say it all the time. It's like when I'm trying to scout out what portion of the movie, where we left off last time, how far we're going to go into it. It's always like, well, okay, that was 10 minutes. It ends at a scene, but is that enough to discuss? But do I add too much more, and that's going to be too much to discuss? And this seemed to be just right. We got way more out of this than what I actually thought we were going to.
And you know what? That's usually the case. We always think, oh, yeah, what are we going to get into with this? But I mean, our guests definitely always deliver. We always have some really amazing, meaningful conversation. And I'm always so impressed by just, how much we end up pulling out of this and how much I end up really contemplating and relearning things about each one of these segments as well. So, yeah, it was great.
Yep, I agree. I can't wait till we get to the next segment next month, because this movie just has so much going on, and there's barely a wasted moment in the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, with that, we're going to say thank you for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our ongoing series covering Revenge of the Sith. We hope you've enjoyed it, and if you want to make sure you catch part 4, then hit that subscribe button on your podcatcher of choice if you haven't done so already. And after you subscribe, please like, rate, share the show with all your friends. We'll give you our social media contacts here in just a moment. I'd like to also remind you can find the entire catalog of shows over on retrozap.com. We've got 5.5 years of podcasts out there, and we've got several other movie series covering The Empire Strikes Back, Rogue One, Return of the Jedi, Attack of the Clones, The Phantom Menace. We've been doing this for a while. These series are always a lot of fun. So if you want to check those out, that might be the best place to catch them, as your podcatcher is probably not going to have those episodes available anymore. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody where they can find us again on social media and elsewhere on the internet?
My pleasure as always. We are very conveniently found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And we also have some other fun places you can find us as well. So we do have a Pinterest page with lots of boards. So if you're in need of all kinds of fun Star Wars ideas for various things, you can head over there. And then we do have our 2 YouTube outlets. So we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. There's no video, there's, static images, but it's always fun to listen to. So if you would tune into either one of those, you can also leave us some reviews, you can subscribe, and also, interact with us as well. So we'd always love to hear your feedback on both of those. And once again, that's YouTube and YouTube Music. And then we also have a TeePublic store, so you can snag one of 7 different show logo designs that are available on all kinds of goods, from apparel and home goods and pretty much everything in between. And so every one of those purchases does help to support the show, and we would really appreciate it if you'd give it a shot. So once again, that's on TeePublic, and the link to that, once again, is in our show notes.
Okay, what's the latest in cosplay?
All right. Well, the latest is I just got done with Fan Expo Cleveland just this last weekend. So if you haven't checked out my Instagram lately at j.snips cosplay, you're going to find a lot of fun things over there. And always on the Instagram with my Ahsoka, with Hera, my fourth sister, my 2 different versions of Hera that I just mentioned, as well as my original concept Mandalorian. And I have a couple of new cosplays, not Star Wars, but I just debuted at Fan Expo. So I'll let you figure those out. So once again, that's at j.snips cosplay.
All right, upcoming on the show on Friday, we will be getting into the latest Star Wars news after taking a week off, just because recording schedules didn't permit us to get any good collection of news. And then on Monday, we get back into the Clone Wars. So make sure you check those things out. All right, thanks for listening to episode 865 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. Until next time, may the Force be with you.